Welcome back. We hope you've had a really great lunch, that you've had some great conversations as you've been discussing the lightning talks that you saw just before lunch and all the other exciting things that we had shared together as part of the Belong Conference in our first half. It's excitement alert time again because it's the results of the competition to win a copy of the Biblica Europe Accessible Edition New Testament. We've had some fantastic entries coming in. It's been really hard to pick 6 that will be the recipients of a copy of the New Testament. But hard though that job was, we've managed to get it down to the 6, and we're going to share with you who those recipients are going to be now and show you the photos that they sent in.
Yes,
and hopefully they're going to appear on the screen. Here we go.
Number 1.
The unpronounceable name again. Toru Redding. We've seen this picture before, but it's a brilliant picture and shows the team there engaging with the programme, and brilliant to see you guys and to be able to share with you a copy of the New Testament Accessible Edition.
I think the smiles and the beanbags won that.
I think you can never have too many beanbags. Yeah, that's important.
And next, Tabitha Courtney's picture showing the guys up at Blackburn Diocese Board of Education. A Bible will be coming to you.
That's brilliant. Lots of excitement in that photo, isn't there? And this is a really nice one as well. Look at that focal point. That's a really, really great photo of what you guys have been collecting together and building together into your focal point, your reminders of the different things that we've been thinking about during the day. So, here's a really good example of that. And well done to Sean Davison for sending that one in. And we'll be getting our copy of the New Testament on its way to you.
Brilliant. Our next winner is been submitted by David Harling. We're finding how much we belong together and really enjoyed being parts of the conference today. Look at you guys in church there. That's fabulous, and a great. I think that's a panoramic photo as well.
Yeah.
So extra points for that.
There's a little bit of skills going on with that, which is very good. Some nice skills. And then we've got URC CYW, URC Thames North Synod office. And you've got a bit of an umbrella. I like that, under the umbrella of the children's and youth work. Very good, very witty, like a bit of wit. We want to unlock faith and fellowship, discipleship and belonging for all, and to win the accessible Bible. Well, you've certainly done that, and we are going to be getting a copy of that on its way to you. The product placement of the Belonging Guide had nothing to do with that decision.
And I think, is this our final winner now? Is our focal point, coffee and alcohol-free pub, ordinary people, and that's folk who've gathered from Altrincham Circuit. So brilliant, well done you guys. You look like you're having a great time together.
Loving that.
We love seeing that picture. Thank you
really
very much.
Great. Thank you to everybody that took part in that. And it was hard to pick our 6. There were so many other really good photos that got sent in too. And what it showed us is what you guys are doing as you gather and build your focal points and share with each other and just engage with each other during the conference. So it's been really encouraging for us to be able to see what you're doing. Please do continue to engage via social media. Send in your comments and thoughts, your tweets, photos of the things that you're doing. Remember to use the hashtag BConf18 to make sure that those are flagged up on our media channels here. And also, don't forget to send in your questions for the question panel, the discussion panel that's happening later as well. We've got Pete and Christine Windmill, Tim Edwards and myself, who, along with Gail, will be discussing those questions and hopefully giving you some helpful responses to them later on. So keep sending those questions in, use the hashtag, and we'll answer as many of those as we can later on.
It's time now for our final and our third keynote talk of today, which is brought to us by Mark Arnold. And we're now at the beginning of session 5, if you've been following on your programme guides through the course of today. And Mark is going to ask us the question, what is a vision of belonging for all?
having looked at the current state of the nation for belonging for all, as well as the theology of belonging, what does the future look like if we get belonging right for all of our churches? What could belonging mean for everyone, whether they have additional needs or not? What are the next steps to make this a reality? 55 years ago, almost to the day, Dr. Martin Luther King delivered one of the greatest speeches ever made. He was a man who changed the face of a nation, possibly of the world, a man who had a dream. And as we remember Dr. King's dream and his life and his legacy, we're reminded that he dedicated his life to gaining equality for the disadvantaged, to speaking out for those who were ignored and overlooked, to defending those who were badly treated and abused, to being one of the greatest social activists of all time, wonderfully campaigning to bring about equality for all. Dr. King said these words, "I have a dream. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a country where they will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these things to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." For Dr. King, his dream was for everyone, of every colour, to live together as one people, equal in every way. It was a glorious dream, a dream that inspired a generation, although a dream that still has a long way to go before it's fully realised. We too have a dream. It's a dream that has its roots in the same place as Dr. King. A dream of equality, of social justice, of belonging for all. I have a dream that my son will one day live in a nation where he'll be judged not by his disability, but by the positive impact he and his life makes, by the work that his life has inspired, and by his loving character. I have a dream that one day children with additional needs and disabilities will join hands together with all other children as accepted and loved sisters and brothers. I have a dream that this nation of ours, including our churches and our synagogues and our mosques and our temples, our government institutions, our schools, all of our society will one day not just declare that all are created equal, but will wholly demonstrate it in their actions and their attitudes. And my dream is that this day will come soon, for it is a day that is long overdue. And as we look forward to that day, as we strive towards it in our church, we can also look back at the examples given to us by the greatest person to ever set foot on this earth, Jesus Christ himself. Let us be encouraged and inspired as we look at the story of Jesus meeting Bartimaeus. You'll know the story of how Jesus was on his way back from Jericho to Jerusalem, and he had the disciples and a whole throng of followers that were accompanying him. And as he went along on that journey, they encountered Bartimaeus, a man who had been born blind, who was begging at the side of the road as he had done for his entire life. And as Bartimaeus heard the crowd coming and recognized that Jesus must be among them, he called out to Jesus, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And he called out several times until Jesus, over the noise of all the crowd, heard him and beckoned for him to be brought before him. And as Bartimaeus stood before Jesus and the crowd all gathered round, their expectation would have been that Jesus would just heal Bartimaeus and then move on. But Jesus has always been doing the unexpected. And on this occasion, he did the unexpected as well. He asked Bartimaeus a question. And in asking him a question, possibly one of the most important questions that he or anybody else has ever asked, it was just transforming, because the question he asked Bartimaeus is, "What would you have me do for you? What would you have me do for you?" And Bartimaeus asked for his sight to be restored, and it was. But in asking that question, what we see revealed from Jesus is that Jesus didn't assume what Bartimaeus wanted. He asked him. And that's a great message for us too, isn't it? Maybe a message that we can take back to our churches. Not to assume what people of any age with disability might need from us, but to ask the question, what might I do for you? If we're willing to ask that question, and I pray, Lord, that we are, then we must be prepared to hear the answer and be willing to act upon it. To be willing to engage with children, young people, and adults with additional needs and disabilities that we encounter and their families, and to make that dream of belonging a reality for all. It's no good just trying to do it on our own. There's a saying within the disability community, nothing about us without us. It's a really positive and powerful message for us to hear. It's about belonging. It's about being included. It's about having a say in the way that everybody is supported. Don't do inclusion unto us, but do inclusion and acceptance and belonging with us. Let's ensure that at every step of the journey, the people that we are trying to create belonging for are included in that process with us. There are so many ways that we can take those next steps on that journey, but perhaps listening is the best place to start. Ask the question Jesus asked, what would you have me do for you? Hear the answer, and then work together to make it a reality. We're building a charter of belonging, a document that each church will have access to, a document that will create a set of guidelines to help churches to create that belonging in partnership with people of all ages with disability and additional needs within their community. Sets out some of the next steps that you can take, and we'll be making that charter available very soon. And have somebody within your church who owns this on behalf of your church, helping your church to take those next steps forward. Somebody who can be your inclusion champion, helping the church to put in place the changes that are needed. Being willing to understand the experiences of children, young people and adults with additional needs and disabilities, and to listen to them and act together to make a difference. Having someone in that role keeps it at the top of the agenda. Because without somebody owning this, in this world where there's safeguarding and there's GDPR and there's health and safety and there's always something that grabs our attention and grabs the demands on our time, having somebody who makes sure we keep our attention on inclusion and accessibility and belonging is so important. And try to, within that role, have somebody who is either journeying with a disability or additional need themselves, or perhaps in their close family, have somebody that they're supporting that has an additional need or disability. Not because this is tokenistic or ticks a box, but because their lived experience will be really valuable and helpful on the journey. And why wouldn't we want to access that and include that as we take these steps for ourselves? Having somebody in this role can be absolutely transforming for a church. I delivered some training a couple of years ago to a church in St Albans who had a couple of children in their children's work who had additional needs. And at the end of the training, a woman came to talk with me and said she was going to be their inclusion champion to take this forward. I bumped into her again a few months ago and asked her how it was going, and she reminded me of the 2 children that they were looking to support at that time. And then shared with me that they're now supporting 22 children and young people and their families where there are additional needs and disabilities. It's taken off in a wonderful way. It's transformed their church in amazing and wonderful ways as well. Creating belonging for all needs cultural leadership. Leadership that says it's not okay to loudly tut or harshly stare or make stage-whispered comments about parenting if a child is having a meltdown. We don't accept that in this place. Leadership that says it is okay for children, young people, and adults with additional needs or disabilities to participate, to serve the church in any way that they are called and feel willing and able to be able to do. Leadership that creates an environment where every child, young person, and adult can encounter the gospel message, can respond to the calling of our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. That everyone can come together to be discipled, mentored, growing in their faith together, and responding alongside each other to that call to serve and to be able to be leading and sharing in that work together. I have that dream. I hope you have that dream too, and that together we can make that dream a reality. Let's start today, shall we?
Mark's made a very impassioned plea there for us in the church to really start to move in a direction that allows everybody to belong as they are. And so you have some time to reflect on what he's said now. There are questions in the guide on page 12. Take a look at some of those in the next few moments. Mark also mentioned about some ways for a church to be a place of belonging. And he said that this would be a resource to you. And I just wanted to show you that on the back of the guide is this 10 ways for your church to be a place of belonging. And we thought it would be worth letting you know that this has grown out of 3 Generate. And so some children and young people who came to last year's 3 Generate had some conversations, and they talked to us about what they needed in church, and we listened really well to them and created this document as a result. And so we've been able to hear their voices, and we can reflect on this and think about how can we then take it and use it to guide what we do in church with them. So time over to you to explore some questions now.
Welcome back. We really hope that you've had some great conversations as you've been just exploring the thoughts that were brought out in that last talk. There's an opportunity now to have a look at another lightning talk. Yep. So head to the Methodist Church website to select the next lightning talk that you would like to have a look at in your group or individually, and spend some time watching that and then having a conversation about it. And exploring the themes that come through that talk. We'll be back at about 1:45, so we'll see you then. Welcome back, and we really hope that you found the lightning talk that you had a look at and a conversation about really helpful and challenging and informative. During the day, we've been so thrilled with all the social media action, the comments, the tweets, and particularly the photos that have been sent through to us. And well, we already looked at those that had been the winners of the Biblica Europe Accessible Edition New Testaments, but we thought we'd share with you some montages of all the other photos that we've received during the conference. So we're going to have some of those up on the screen now. Wow, there's some terrific ones there. People's focal points, different. There's a cat. We have a cat watching. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Diverse audience.
Absolutely. Again, some great pictures of people gathered together and looking at things. There's a dog that's wanting to look out the window rather than watch us. I quite understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a nice lot of cake on a plate there as well.
Yeah. And there's a plate that once had cake on it but is now empty. Lots of sweets and different things going on. There's definitely a food theme that's been carrying on through the day there. So brilliant. Thank you so much for sending all those photos in and sharing them. And do continue the conversation after the conference has finished. Continue to use the BConf18 hashtag and engage in the conversation after we've finished here today.
We have reached the final session of our day, which is session 6, our live panel conversation. And we've got some time now with all these folk who are here with us to respond to some of the questions that you've been sending in through the course of today. So I'll let the panel introduce themselves. We'll start off with you, Mark.
So, I'm Mark Arnold from Urban Saints and the Additional Needs Alliance.
And I'm Christine Windmill from Count Everyone In, equipping and encouraging the church to include adults with learning disabilities.
And I'm Pete Windmill from Count Everyone In, and the other half of the better half.
Yes, and I'm Tim Edwards from Charing Cross Methodist Church.
It's really good that you've been able to be with us today, but you've also been part of helping make this day happen. So thank you for everything that you've done to contribute. We've had lots of fabulous questions in from people, so we've probably got enough. We haven't got time to obviously do everything, but we'll make a start. There have been quite a few questions which are focused around change, really, and I think they're going to appear for us in a moment on the screen. So I'm just going to read through to you some of the ones that we've had on this subject. So James asked, was there a point for Charing Cross where they had to make this change to become more inclusive? How did they handle any conflict during that time? How did they come out the other side? It's really, really good questions. Lauren Russell asked, our churches need to become inclusive on a Sunday morning. How can we go about changes to this when so many people perhaps don't want or are reluctant to make that change happen? And then we would like to hear about the story of Charing Cross from when you decided to make the changes. How easy was that? How on board were the whole congregation initially? A story for encouragement for people trying to make changes currently. So maybe some folk who are in that position who would benefit from that. So, Tim, if we start with you, tell us a little bit about how you managed to go through that process of change.
Well, I think it's fair to say that music led the way for us. Most of the young people that come to the church aren't from church families. They came into us through the youth club mostly, and our youth club is in many ways church in its own right, because the church band would play in the youth club, the puppet team would do parody songs or a little sketch in the youth club. There would be Christian music up on the screens. Now the young people wanted to bring this into worship, and there came a point really where more and more this was accepting. So before, when I was saying about participation and allowing voice and influence, allowing them to have that opportunity to bring this, that's so important. We did this. It didn't go down well with everybody. You know, we're honest about these things. For some people, the drums and the bass guitar were just too much. But But there was a realisation that change needed to happen. When our junior church was coming out after the second song, and we were taking sometimes as many as 50 young people out of worship and leaving just a small congregation behind for the rest of the service, we realised that there needed to be that change. And also the young people themselves wanted to have more involvement in the rest of the worship and the rest of the service. So that's when it really came home to us. The change had to come about. Most of our congregation were on board with that. There was a lovely lady, Margaret, who sadly recently gone to heaven, but she was in her 90s, but she was always accepting and so supportive, and she was saying, well, the drums and the guitars are really not quite my scene, but I realise that this is the future for the church. She just surrounded our young people with love, and that was the way forward for us. One or two people couldn't cope with that, and they left, and they moved on to another Methodist church where they could still have a traditional worship, and we love them, you know, and they're still part of our family as well. But our worship changed to bring in all the young people and make it part of the whole of the service.
It's interesting for me because I think what you've also been talking about there is something to do with intergenerational community and how you had sought to bring almost two different congregations together so they could be one worshipping body. And that what was key in that actually was a sense that the relationships that were there were lots of conversations that needed to be had between people, really, to hear people's objections or to hear their kind of their uncertainties in all of that. But it felt that was perhaps important in that process as well.
And it didn't happen overnight. We introduced the music and the changes slowly over a period. But there comes a point where the whole church has ownership of it, and the whole church cheers that we've done that, you know. And that's when you come out the other side of it, you know, when you've got that. And you do get that. So I would encourage you, you know, take these steps, because the church needs to be more inclusive. Not just people with disabilities, but everybody in your congregation. Give them the chance to participate to the full.
Pete, what would you kind of say if people are trying to think about kind of coping with that sense of change? What's useful for them to know?
I mean, be patient. It's listen. It's, as we've been saying, that discussion and working through people's struggles. You're not going to please everybody. But if we believe in one body, one church, then we have to find ways in which we can take those biblical principles and they become part of life rather than something that we talk about but don't actually do. So that listening, that gentle questioning, that patience, few steps at a time. So you're not throwing everything at everybody. People say to me, well, of course, Pete, the best way you would say is to set up a small group for adults with learning disabilities on their own. No, I wouldn't, actually. I would say I think there's a place for both. But we want one church where we can be encouraged and inspired by the gifting that God has given everybody if they believe in him. And if we hold those giftings back, then actually the church is bereft. How do we find a place to encourage and enable, and I think that's probably the key word, to enable the whoever to be part of the life in general?
Absolutely. Christine, do you want to add anything really about that sense of enabling? What's helpful there for churches?
I think it's very helpful for people to recognise, for us all to recognise, that the church is an organism and not an organisation. And therefore it needs to be something that's living and breathing. We talk about the body of Christ. And in that sense, I don't think you ever come out the other side because there is always going to be change. Otherwise, it's not a living being. Otherwise, we'd be worshipping like the first century Christians. We are in danger, in some of our churches, of being more like the Victorian Christians, but actually we're called to be those enablers in the 21st century.
Wow. Mark, did you want to sort of add anything on this topic? Because I think you've had some experiences along these lines.
Yeah, it's echoing what everybody has already said, but also I suppose there are a couple of things that are really key as well, which is that leadership is vital in this, absolutely crucial. Culture is set usually by the leadership of a church, and culture is what is going to enable change to happen. And so it has to be led from the top, it has to be preached from the pulpit, it has to be something that becomes part of everything that the church does. But also, for those folk who particularly find change the hardest, sometimes a way to get them to start to perhaps understand it a little better and start to be involved in it is to give them something to do. Because if people are sat on the periphery, it's much easier to snipe and to comment from that position. But if they're involved, if they're drawn in, then they can start to see the value that change has, and that can be really powerful.
Excellent. I'm wondering, Tim, if at Charing Cross that you would reflect that sense of that it's been church leadership that's been really key in some of the change that you've done.
Well, it has, yes. The leadership team certainly led the way in that. But for us at Charing Cross, and I'm sure for many other churches, the whole church really has been behind us. They just get involved. If you give people a voice and influence, if you give people the opportunity to get on board, I find they do get on board, especially when you respect their views, when you make their ideas happen and become part of that as well. What you were saying before about including people in all of that, that's what drove it forward with us. The leadership team couldn't have done it on its own, but with everybody on board, it happens.
Yeah. Let's move on to another question, which is from the URC Children's and Youth Work. They have a group who are gathered today at Trinity Abingdon, URC Methodist Church. And their question is, did Charing Cross start as a young, varied congregation? And if not, how did you get people in? You started to answer that, but perhaps you could say a little bit more about sort of how your children and youth work developed.
Well, there's a lot of children in youth work at Charing Cross, and you don't have to come to church to come to the youth club. And we set out to create a club that was inclusive, and we did also have the backing of our local authority in Wilbur Council in doing that, and they supported us, encouraged us, and sent referrals to us as well. But the main thing is that through the friendships that we built with the young people, through the opportunities that we had to mission and encourage people in the faith, they came through into the church. And it's that transition from the youth club to the church that created much of the church of today at Charing Cross, really.
Okay, wow, thank you. Let's move on to the next question, which is from Hannah Newton. Hannah says, how do you best include children with additional behavioural needs, particularly on a Sunday morning group, when they are prone to violent behaviour? And she gives you examples of throwing furniture or even setting fire to curtains. So we're talking quite extreme things. But would you have any suggestions then about how to include children with that level of need? Mark?
Yeah, it's a really challenging question to read, isn't it? And when you sort of think about the situation that church is talking about there, but sometimes we have to start by looking at what perhaps is creating those behaviours in the children in the first place. So why are they throwing things? Why are they setting fire to the curtains? Those sorts of things. And to try and offer them an alternative to doing that, which is something that they they really enjoy and can engage with, and really does sort of meet where it's itching for them, and therefore, you know, they don't want to do those more destructive things. So using the things that they're really good at and that they really enjoy doing to help them to learn. You know, lots of examples of groups that use resources like Lego, for example. So, you know, lots of kids love using Lego. There's, you know, they can build things out of Lego. Like, I've seen great examples of things like the Temple of Jerusalem constructed out of Lego. Darth Vader was the high priest. But, you know, a little bit of artistic license we can give for that. Another group created a little diorama of Abraham and Isaac up the mountain. I think in that example, Mr. Wu was Abraham and Luke Skywalker was Isaac, but they'd created that. There's a brick Bible that they can use as well. And so, you know, if they're into Lego, that can be a good tool that distracts them from other activities. Minecraft, you know, there's a Minecraft Bible that they can access. And I've seen groups that have created, for example, Jericho out of Minecraft. They've built Jericho, they've marched their figures around it 7 times, and then they've demolished it. And it's really great, and it draws kids in, and particularly kids who might have autism or ADHD, those sorts of more hidden disabilities, who are really into that online world and gravitate towards it. So it's providing things like that, you know, with the Minecraft Bible, with different tools. There's a website called Pixel Heart Bible, which offers a whole range of videos of Bible stories told using Minecraft. And so it's things like that actually offer them things that they really enjoy and engage with and are good at, and distract them from other perhaps behavioural sort of activities that might be more destructive. So it's finding replacements for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Christian, do you, I mean, if we think about that moment perhaps where somebody is with a child in that, what would you want to say to that worker who's perhaps that's what's going on around them?
To reassure them that they are welcome in that place at that time, whatever the child is doing, provided it is safe. So I think we have a responsibility to make a safe environment in the first place, as safe as we possibly can. If we're talking about Lego bricks, then there is always that potential for throwing, but nevertheless, to demonstrate through a calm atmosphere, as calm as possible, that this is okay and you can enjoy yourself by taking part. One thing we've found quite helpful with adults, and I believe with children too, is the idea of a visual timetable. So the children have an idea that this won't go on forever. I might not enjoy this bit, but by having a series of cards that display visually what the activity is, then they will know that, yes, we're going to have a time of prayer now, or we're going to be using musical instruments, singing, whatever. Have a card that displays that, and maybe for a child with autism it would be good for them to have that responsibility to take the card down when that particular activity is over, move on to the next thing, and one child might think, I don't like doing that, but oh, okay, well there's something else I like coming after it. So that can be helpful.
No, that's really, really useful, thank you. Let's move on to our next question from Jez Hackett. How do we work with groups of people whose needs directly contradict? That sounds like quite a tricky situation. Pete, what would you want to say to Jez?
I can think of an example of one of the Christian festivals some years ago where I'd been introduced to a young man who was very tall, very beefy and very loud, just before the meeting started.
Okay.
And I'm so grateful that I was introduced to him because I knew his name. Very intelligent, very knowledgeable about the Bible and lots of things, but could be, fairly aggressive because he was right and nobody else would be. In the same grouping of people was somebody who you might call the church mouse. Sat in the corner, very quiet, and found him actually very intimidating.
Okay.
And I'd got up to introduce the week and what we would be doing, and particularly doing that day, and suddenly said person at the loud voice started telling me what we were going to be doing, and you could see those on the extreme. And I just mentioned his name and said, thank you. Can we have a chat later? And he stopped, and it's because we used their name. We weren't, you, be quiet. We were treating and valuing him and as a person.
Okay.
A few minutes later, he was off again, and I went, look, I'm sorry, but we did say that I would talk to you later. And actually, lots of people at the moment would like to hear what I have to say. Oh, sorry, mate. Now, it didn't work all the way through. There were times when it didn't happen. By the next day, for him, which I don't normally do, we actually gave a team member to him, if you like, as a buddy. Could help him to know where those boundaries were at any one time. Does that work with everybody? No, it doesn't. But for that person, it did. But the look that I could see being at the front from those who were quieter was, somebody's in control. And I'm not going to be dismissed. Yeah. They both have names and they're both to be valued. I think that's key to a lot of it. It's valuing people, even when, and hey, this is a guy who didn't want the job that he got, years ago. And it was because of that sort of behaviour that I didn't want to know. But you know what? It's so rewarding when somebody suddenly begins to understand that you're actually for them, not against them, when they've spent their whole life being told, shut up and sit down. But you're saying, I want to hear you, but not now and not at this moment.
And that, what you're saying about people's names is really key, and that's something that's key really across children and youth work, that it's important for us to get to know the names of who we're working with so that we can directly mention them, so that we can have that sense of connection with people. I'm wondering, Tim, if at Charing Cross that this has been something for you, if you felt that there have been needs at times that contradict one another.
Well, sometimes you get that, don't you? The loud noise of the music against the person that needs quieter time. There are ways of balancing it out, the ear defenders or all sorts of things. But knowing the person, respecting the person and valuing the person, I feel is the most important thing. And sometimes you don't know what those needs are. It's only by befriending people, by really getting to know people, and as I said earlier, by valuing and respecting and letting them take part. It's when you get to that knowledge and level and that friendship that we can all share. That's when you find ways of working these things out together, because we're all individuals, and it's that individual need being met.
Thank you, yes. Let's move on to our next question, which is about worship. And I'm sure this is something on many of our minds today. So a question from Lauren Russell. Is our worship accessible? Our hymns have so many words and sometimes big ones. Should we re-evaluate? Mark, what do you reckon?
Wow, yeah. I think that she's absolutely right. So many of our worship songs, and whether that's older, more traditional hymns or more contemporary worship songs, that can be inaccessible, either because they use long words or because they don't follow a standard flow or format, so people don't know what's coming next or whether we're repeating something or not. So I think there are some issues there, but those issues can be helped by putting things in place that enable those worship songs to be more accessible. So making sure that there's the words up on a screen that everybody can access. If it is possible to have them signed or interpreted, then to do that. But also to engage with people of all abilities and find songs that they find really helpful. So often worship leaders will just decide what the worship music is going to be. Actually engaging with people and saying, what are the songs, what are the hymns that you really find both accessible and helpful to your worship, and let's include more of those. And there are some great hymns and worship songs out there that are really inclusive and accessible and use perhaps easier language and an easier flow of music in the way that they're delivered.
I think sometimes it's the case as well that it's helpful to explain beforehand what a song is about, roughly, and sort of talk a bit about the theme, what we're going to
Yeah.
be singing about now,
Yeah.
so that we have that in mind as well. That
Absolutely.
makes a difference. Christine, do you
Yeah, I
find that to be true?
And yet we don't want an explanation of every single word, every single sentence, because that can really bore you to tears before you've even started singing it. But that's right. If you can stick to fairly, as Mark was saying, fairly simple words that mean what they say and say what they mean, not too complicated in metaphors and similes and things. Oh, it's a tall order with a lot of even our modern worship songs. But don't think we have to sing every single verse if it is an old hymn. There's some beautiful old hymns that'd be a shame to lose them totally. And there's also a place for involvement, whether it be through waving a flag or having a percussion instrument. Yes, I know that can really put some worship bands off, but then so can some of the words be putting other people off. So there are different ways to involve people.
Yeah.
And let's try different methods.
Yeah.
Let's never forget the work of the Holy Spirit, though, and that often through worship, through singing, somehow we enter a place that we might not otherwise be able to enter. Having said that, I would still agree with everything that's been said, but also give a real big plug about the colours that we use on projection, and not having moving pictures behind words. There's a real thing about doing that at times these days, and why would you want to do that? Because the words, especially if you're dyslexic, suddenly are going all over the place. So let's think of ways of doing that. But I mean, there are hymns that we've sung for years. You know, did you worship your potentate this morning? What does ineffably sublime mean? Rolling spheres, are they snooker balls? I mean, you know, we make assumptions about songs and everything else. We just need to help people to understand and not assume that they get it all.
Yeah.
And let's not assume that everyone can read. Simply because someone has got to their teenage years does not mean they can read. And therefore, if we are putting words up on a screen, not only, and I do agree totally with Pete and what he said, you'll be glad to know, but be careful about the font that we use on a screen and the size that it is. We would always prefer, and I'm sorry, I know it isn't that case today, to have the rounded A's, the ones that you would write yourself. And the same with the G, and question marks look really weird on some of the fonts that we get on our average PCs these days. So let's think about that, and where possible, make it easier for people to read. Well, there's also a case for sometimes saying the words of the next line of a song or hymn before you sing it. It doesn't work with everything, so do practice in advance, but therefore not relying on the ability to read.
But I like the fact that, so even sort of beyond sung worship, that actually there are other ways that people can worship, they can contribute, and we can, and we saw a lot of that at Charing Cross actually, of people being able to join in a host of different ways. So we want to think.
Movement, and it all contributes.
Yeah.
Even for non-dancers, and I can vouch for that.
Thank you. Mark Tizard has a question for us. He's quoting something from earlier in the day where he says that everybody feels part of the church, and he's wondering, why is it so difficult to do? Tim, why do you think that it's difficult to help everybody feel that they belong?
Well, it shouldn't be, but it
It
is,
often
isn't
is,
it?
yeah.
And it's all down to your understanding and your experiences and really your attitude as well. Sometimes we've just got to open our eyes and just take those steps. Sometimes fear gets in the way. You know, we were talking about music a second ago. If you'd hear some of our young people sing, it's out of tune, it's all over the place, and none of that matters because God is cheering in heaven at that wonderful sound that's coming out. Don't let fear stand in the way. Don't let attitude stand in the way. Embrace through God. And let God take you on that journey.
And I think that ties in really with our last question, which Lydia has asked, Lydia Harrison, that people are afraid of being judged. And I think regardless of who we are, that's always something which sort of lurks somehow, that we feel that as people of faith that there maybe is a bar that we're measured against perhaps. So Lydia's asking, how can we make this right? How do we reduce that sense of that people may be concerned about when they enter into church, Mark?
I think it is about raising awareness, raising understanding, helping people to go on that journey to a place where actually they're less afraid of making mistakes. And you know, we all still make mistakes. You know, there are things that we get wrong. So nobody's perfect. But the reality is that it's better to go on that journey and try than to not try at all. Yeah, you know, there will be times that we'll get it wrong and people might criticise us for that. But the more we try, the better we can be at getting it right, and the more we can then help others as a result. And you know, that sense of being judged can be a two-edged thing. It can be people feel that they might be judged for doing the wrong thing to try and support you know, a child, a young person, a family, or an adult with additional needs or disability. Those families can sometimes feel that they might be judged if they're coming into church, and if their child has a bit of a meltdown and everybody's staring, you know, they'll feel that as well. And so it's how we take everybody on that journey, that inclusive, belonging, accepting journey. And it takes time, and as we've explored before, it takes the leadership of the church to drive that. It takes the whole church to go on that journey together. But if we go on that journey, you know, caring for each other and looking out for each other, and with our aim to create that belonging for everyone, then judging becomes a thing of the past.
And Mark, I've been one of those that judge.
Yeah.
You know, I've often told when I've been teaching in church today, how often as a younger married person did I judge parents for the way their kids were kicking off in the aisle in the supermarket, perhaps, but I didn't understand. It was ignorance.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew now what I knew then, and I wouldn't have done that. But just a couple of weeks ago, we were at a festival, and I was doing the teaching, and I can't even remember now what I was doing. But a family had come, a mother and two tots, because there was no provision for that child on site. So they said, is it all right if we come into your meeting? And no, it's not for us. And this little child had come up and was at my feet playing. And I just stopped, and she said, I'm sorry. I said, no, it's okay. Because I suddenly got a picture of what I was actually teaching on. And we miss so much by not including, and we need to say to that mother, it's okay. Yeah. And she came to me afterwards and said, I'm so glad you persuaded me to stay.
There's a lot really for us to do in terms of affirming people, Christine. I think that's something that's just come out of today, that particularly for parents who are bringing their children into unfamiliar environments, that having some words of affirmation could be really helpful.
Definitely. We may only have that 1 hour of feeling a little bit uncomfortable because there are people doing things that we are not comfortable with. Let's feel and think and pray for those parents and carers who have got 24 hours a day, in many cases, 7 days a week, of living with those challenges and feeling condemned. If they can't come into their church for 1 hour in a week and feel accepted and loved, there's something badly wrong, isn't there?
Yes, yeah. I'm afraid that is all we've got time for.
Goodness.
We were just getting warmed up, really, weren't we? But we need to draw our conversation to a close. But thank you ever so much, all of you, for all that you've brought to today. It's been great to have you with us. We would also like to thank the host of other people behind the scenes who have helped make the Belonging Conference happen. We have had some great guys who've been signing for us. We've got the guys who've been doing social media, the guys in the back room as well. And we also want to say thank you to you for joining in and being part of this day and giving this conference a sense of being a bigger community, exploring this topic with one another. So thank you ever so much for that.
Yes, thank you. And as sadly our time is starting to draw to a conclusion for our conference today, we just want to help you to continue the journey. And as you've been challenged and hopefully inspired and enabled and equipped and encouraged to continue on this journey, to create that accepting, inclusive, belonging space in your church, in your setting, in the place where you gather as God's people. We want to help you to carry that conversation on. And so do continue to tweet and to engage with Facebook and all of those things using the BConf18 hashtag. But also visit the website where there will be extra resources, information, reading ideas that can help you to carry some of these ideas forward. If you'd like to watch the whole conference all over again, then that will be available on the website too, and you'll be able to watch everything that you've seen through the day. So if you've only seen part of it and you really wished you'd seen the rest, the opportunity will be there to do that over the next few weeks. And beyond that, all of the videos that we've shown today will be able to be downloaded from the website for some time to come. So do access those, download those, perhaps even use them in your own church or community to share the messages that those videos have brought. Thank you so much for being a part of today and for all that you've shared with us and sent to us through social media as well. It's been great to journey together with you, and we're so grateful for you joining us through this Belonging Conference.
It really has been a really great day, and it's just flown by like greased lightning, so we can't quite believe that this is where we are. We're going to close our conference now with a final moment of worship. And we want to return to where we started, which is really reflecting on that passage from Romans 12. So there's time for you now to take a look at your focal points and the things that you have gathered there in that space. And there might be a collection of different objects, of things that you've written, things that you may have drawn. And we want you to choose one of them that feels significant for you. So spend a few moments, have a look at the things that you've gathered together, think about why you put them there, why they were significant, and choose one thing, maybe take that and just hold it in your hands for a few moments and just prayerfully hold that before God and spend some moments just reflecting on why it is important for you.
Welcome back. Let's remain in an attitude of prayer as the children from the Briar School lead us in our closing prayers.
I hope you enjoy listening to our poems, what we made.
Dear God, thank you for football. Thank you for music to listen to. Holidays, thank you for helping my dreams came true. I am dreaming of being a builder.
I am dreaming about being a footballer.
Thank you, Lord, for helping us to get married.
Finding our loved ones.
Thank you for our health, doctors, hospitals, checkups, dentists, police.
Arresting the bad ones. I thank you that we can be with God on our side. We still believe in you even if we can't see you. Thank you for making us who we are, all different but the same. Amen.
Our prayer for you is that you know God's blessing as you continue to serve him in ministry and the people who are parts of your church and community.
Thank you again for being with us throughout this day. We're going to end the day with our friends from Charing Cross Methodist Church leading us in a blessing.
The Lord bless you
and keep you.
The Lord make his face
shine on you.
and be gracious to you.
The Lord turn his face towards you and give you
Peace.